right, so let's get started. As folks trickle in, they will simply join the conference in session. It is being recorded, so if you happen to miss it, you can always send the link. We'll send the link out to everyone who registered for the webinar. My name is Joe Pappas. I'm a sales engineer with Bonita. I'm based in New York, and unfortunately, we still have snow on the ground. We had got a number of inches, centimeters on the ground yesterday, and hopefully wherever you are, the weather is much nicer. So we're here to talk about getting the big picture with Bonita. So I have a few slides talking about Bonita at a very high level. Then I'm going to go ahead and show a live demo talking about living applications, talking about process applications, API extensions, and so forth. And then we'll have a question and answer session, live question and answer session at the end. But feel free to put questions in the question area of the webinar, and Nicola will take note of those questions. All right. So what is Bonita? Really, Bonita helps you digitally transform your business. Right? As you can see here, it's an open and extensible digital business platform for development teams. And for the first time last year, we were on Gartner's Intelligent Business Process Management Magic Quadrant. In fact, we're the only open source vendor on that list. So we help you build out applications and process applications to make you more efficient. Now, our approach to the process or application development is what you see up here, customizable without custom costs, right? We are a low-code, we take a low-code approach. It doesn't mean a no-code approach, so it does require some coding skills, but we also promote iterative development where you're gathering some requirements, you're building out the application, you're playing it back for your end users, then you're gathering more requirements, more feedback, developing your process application that way. We found that to be a quite effective way to develop applications. But our tooling is really geared towards developers. So developers are creating these applications, but they're getting a lot of input from end users. Because of that, we can meet your complex enterprise needs. So we can connect to your back-end applications through connectors, through APIs, and so forth. But we do provide this graphical tooling to make your developers more productive. So they're not writing thousands of lines of code, they're writing a handful of lines of code. And our tooling is flexible enough to give you ways to extend the framework so you're not stuck with what we provide you. All right, one other option is custom code. We talk to a lot of customers that have built out their applications via custom code, which is great. It meets all of their needs. The problem is the long development lifecycle and the inability to scale. And that usually is when we get the phone call saying we need help, we built this application, it does what we need to do, but we can't scale it, right? We just simply don't have the people to support or to scale it, and that's where Bonita can come in. The other option is to buy something straight out of the box, right? There's no code, very rapid development. You simply buy it. You can think of this as an appliance, right? So that you buy a washing machine, an oven, a microwave. It does what it does very well, but in many cases, particularly with business processes, you need it to do other things, or your business processes change over time, or regulations change over time. And you'll find that with a lot of the out-of-the-box, no-code approaches, it works great until you have to make a change, and then it requires a fairly skilled developer to make those changes, and it's very hard to do. So we at Bonita, we take the low-code approach. We give you the tools to make you more productive, but we also give you the extensibility points to extend our framework as needed. Right? So 3 points of extension with the Bonita platform, right? Going from left to right, a broad range of connectors. We do have a number of connectors out of the box, connecting to databases, content management systems, CRMs, and so forth. However, it doesn't cover the entire range, and if you have a custom application or a custom or a system that we don't have a connector to, you can simply create a connector. Right? That and the REST API extension in the middle there, the primary skill to create additional connectors and REST API extensions is Java. So anything server-side, your skill set is going to be Java. And the nice thing about utilizing Bonita, Bonita will generate all of the skeleton code, and you simply have to put in your glue code to make it work. Right? So you don't have to be a Bonita expert to kind of generate the code. The studio will generate it for you. Then lastly, on the right-hand side, UI Designer. So we have a UI framework based on Angular and Bootstrap. So we provide a drag and drop palette of elements that you can, as you build out your forms and pages. And we also provide a kind of extensive palette of functions, inputs, state pickers, file uploaders, and so forth. But again, there'll be times where you need this custom functionality, and we allow you to extend the framework. The main skill being JavaScript. As I said, the framework is based on Angular and Bootstrap, but you can utilize any client-side technology, jQuery, React, or your own JavaScript library. Okay. High level, this is the architecture of Bonita. Starting in the upper right-hand corner, we have our design times, the Bonita Studio, where you can build out your server-side components, the process flows, connectors, REST API extensions, and so forth. That's an Eclipse-based IDE. You'll be seeing that as part of the demo. The Bonita UI Designer, as I mentioned, is our UI developer, where you develop your forms and that are associated with tasks and living applications and so forth. That's a browser-based editor. They can work in conjunction with a version control system, and I'll be talking about an upcoming announcement for Bonita in terms of version control. So as you build out these applications, they are deployed to the Bonita server, which is what you see here in the middle. The server itself is really just an app server, either Tomcat or Wildfly. So you can utilize the bundled Tomcat or Wildfly app server, or you can simply install Bonita on top of an existing Tomcat or Wildfly. Right, so Bonita really is just a set of applications running on an app server. In the upper left-hand corner, you have your front-end applications. Bonita comes with an out-of-the-box portal, allows you to quickly kind of have this front end where you can log in, start processes, work on tasks, and administer process flows. We also provide a mobile portal. So if you want to access your tasks and start processes via a smartphone or a tablet, you can certainly do that. You can also have your own front end. This is quite common as well, where you've got customers who already have their front end and they simply want to connect into Bonita to start processes, get tasks, and so forth. You can certainly do that via REST APIs. All right. Lower right-hand side are the connectors. I'll show you examples of connectors in just a bit, but it expands the range of technologies, and again, you can extend that to your own applications as well. Lastly, on the bottom there, BPM, Business Process Management, is by nature very stateful, right? You have process instances, they're running, they're unique, so you need to maintain that state. And they tend to be long-running since they involve people. So they're long-running, stateful, asynchronous. So the state has to be stored somewhere. So we've actually have two schemas, one for as you're running process instances, the one you see on the left, the process execution and historical data. So as you're running these process instances, the state is being maintained there. And on the right-hand side is where you store business data, right? Think of this as you want to have some business, I won't say warehouse, but essentially information store to store information that you want to live beyond the life cycle of a process instance. You could think of this as a system of record. Typically, BPM engines interact with systems of record, but they aren't systems of record themselves. You could think of this as a potential system of record. And I'll show you examples of business data. What's nice about this particular schema, the business data schema, is that it not only is accessible by Bonita, but you can access it with other applications as well. It's not, there aren't any blobs or clobs. It's all human readable format. Right. We have two add-ons to the Bonita server that we are excited to announce. The first one is the Bonita Continuous Delivery, and this helps you provision new environments as well as deploy applications as well as automated testing. Right? It's always a bit of a chore to install new software and to configure software properly, and this type of thing you do once and you might not do again for a while. And then if you do it again, you have to remember how you did it initially. what BCD does, it really automates that provisioning process. And probably more importantly, it also helps you deploy and test applications in an automated fashion. Prior to this, there were ways of doing it. It was very, very manual, very, very script intensive, and we help you there with the Bonita continuous delivery. I don't have part of the demo today. We won't be showing it, but we just announced the latest version of it. I hope to put together a demo soon, and we could have another webinar talking about just about BCD. On the right-hand side is our Bonita Intelligent Continuous Improvement. This is really utilizing AI, or artificial intelligence, to kind of look at information, process information as you're running process instances, and it'll help you improve your processes, whether to reassign tasks or to update processes. Really just helps the developers or the process owners improve upon their processes. Again, this is relatively early on in its release and development, and we hope to have a demo on that soon. So 2 add-ons to Bonita itself. Right. Just a quote from Gartner. As I mentioned earlier, we have been included on the latest Intelligent Business Process Management Magic Quadrant. And as you can see here, the folks at Gartner were saying that our implementation of BPM are typically quicker than most other vendors. And as you can see, it's typically within 9 months. And I've actually seen it shorter depending on the use case as well. So depending on the use case, I've seen it as short as 2 to 3 months. So be sure to go out and look at the Gartner report and have a look what they say about us. All right, so demo time. All right, so we're going to show you living applications. I'll tell you what they are. Then I'm going to go back. Essentially, think of this as the the finished product. And then I'm going to go back. I'm going to show you how I built it. And then we'll talk about collaboration and our new announcement regarding a repository. And we'll talk about monitoring and reporting as well. All right, so let's jump right in. All right, so I just switched off from PowerPoint to the Bonita Studio, and what you're viewing here is an application descriptor. And so a lot of stuff going on here, but basically what this allows me to build out an application. This application consists of 2 pages, hotel request and task list. I gave it a unique URL, and you can give this to your end users. They can log in and work on this particular application. This particular application, as the name implies, will allow a user to enter in a hotel request, a destination, arrival date, number of nights. They will submit that process. It will then go to a manager. A manager can approve or deny it. If the manager doesn't respond within 30 seconds, it goes to the VP, who approves or denies it. If it's approved, it goes on to complete the reservation. If it's denied, an email will be sent out. Similarly, once it's approved and it has been completed, an email will be sent out to the initiator saying whether or not it has been approved. And then lastly, in the email itself, there'll be a link, or actually a REST API call, to acknowledge the receipt of this email. All right. A lot of stuff going on here. If I click on this link, it will actually deploy the application out. We'll open up the browser. And so here's our hotel request application. What you're seeing here is some data from our business data model repository. If you recall, if you go back here very quickly, right, this schema here. So I've run a few process instances prior to the webinar, and I'm simply calling up this data, and I'm showing this in our chart widgets, right? So we have out-of-the-box chart widgets that allow you to feed in data to these charts. And so it looks like we have 3 approvals, 2 denials, 2 trips to Paris, 2 trips to New York, and 1 trip to Boston. All right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new hotel request, and then we're going to approve or deny it. So let's click on Create New Hotel Request. All right, so let's go to Grenoble. And on the 19th, say 3 nights, we'll click on Submit. We're then brought to the task list of the of the application. Now, typically this would go to a manager. You wouldn't necessarily have to approve your own request, but just for the sake of brevity, I would have to log out, log back in as somebody else. But as you can see here, I've got a screen here. I'll go ahead and take it. And you can see I've got some information. The requester has put in Grenoble, April 18th, number of nights. I'm going to approve it. Click on OK, or enter in OK. Click on Submit. Oh, you know what happened? I overstepped my time limit of 30 seconds. So what happened was, since Walter Bates didn't respond in 30 seconds, I have to log in as the VP. So I'm going to log in as Daniela. Now, if you're wondering about these names, you get a default organization when you install Bonita. Typically, what you'll do is you utilize our LDAP synchronizer to bring in. You'll connect to your LDAP or Active Directory or your custom user directory and bring in actual people. But for kind of basic demos and kind of getting started, you get this default organization. Right, so it was escalated to the BP, it was escalated to Daniela, so she's going to look at it, she's going to approve it. Okay, she clicks on Submit, do a refresh, right, we have this complete reservation. Since I didn't fill out this form just yet, you kind of get this default form, which is fine. At some point I will go back and add additional fields and whatnot. We'll click on Submit. Now, the process itself is still waiting for the response back from the initiator, right? There's an email, as I mentioned earlier, there's an email that was sent out. If I go back to my email here, let's do a refresh. There we go. We get an email. So it looks like my request, lasting 3 nights, has been approved. I'm going to click here to acknowledge the receipt of this email. And I get back a really ugly JSON message saying the request has been completed. Obviously, I could have made that better, but I was lazy. All right, so we completed the process. So where is that process? How did I build out that process? Let's go back into Studio. Go to Hotel Reservation. And as you can see here, I've got a diagram of the process itself. If you're not familiar with this notation, this is Business Process Modeling Notation version 2.0. We are compliant with that standard. The standard actually covers quite a range of things. We don't cover them all, but we cover most of the most common aspects of the BPMN standard. You've got a palette here. You can drag and drop elements onto the screen. Right, start the process. It goes to the manager. As you saw, we hit the 30-second escalation. It was escalated to the VP. She approved it. It went to complete reservation. It then went to notify requester, waited for a response from the requester, and then completed the process. All right. So there's a lot of stuff going on in here, even though it's a very simple, straightforward process. I'll step you through some of the aspects of this process. All right. So one of the first things first, let's go in here. Right. So I've defined a business variable called hotel request. Right. So you can define these business variables. What that means is you want to capture that data for later perusal, right? As you saw in that very first screen. Right, so actually, if we go back to that screen, let's go back to hotel request. You'll see that it was updated, right? Before we only had Paris, both Boston and New York. That latest request, the Grenoble one, you can see that it shows up here, and now we have an additional approval. So how do I get those business objects? Well, I define those business objects. As you can see here, I've got lots of business objects here. So as you can see, I defined one called hotel request, and I can put in a number of different fields in here: arrival date, number of nights, destination, and so forth. And you can make them complex or primitive types. Now, when you create a business object, it will create a new table in the schema. And if you want to view that schema, let's go to here, business data model, browse data. Let's go to hotel request. Right, so as you can see here, these are the instances that I ran before, and this was the one that I just ran. So as you can see, it's human readable. It's pretty easy to navigate, and as you can see, these are each of the fields that I put in, not this persistent version, but the reason, number of nights, destination. So you could add fields as needed as well. So I create this business variable, and that business variable gets populated. It becomes a row in the table, in the database, and so I can refer to that data throughout the process itself. Next thing you might be wondering is, well, okay, where did the screens come from, right? Where, as I mentioned before, we've got UI Designer. We'll click on that. Right. So the UI Designer is a browser-based editor, and so the hotel request start that page here. Right. Here's the end result, the end product, and here is the design time equivalent. Right. As I mentioned before, these are the out-of-the-box widgets you can drag and drop. Contains mostly the very common aspects like input, date pickers, uploads, and so forth. So you can drag and drop elements onto the screen, and you can then configure them. Right, you can also preview them as well. Right, as you can see, I've got a donut and a pie chart. You can also change the types and click on preview. So you can see how quickly and easily you can make changes to the form itself. Right, so you're not doing a lot of coding. You're simply dragging and dropping elements onto the screen and configuring those elements. Now, I did mention before we take a low-code approach, and what you see down here is that low-code approach. So how did I get that data into these two charts? Well, first I had to make an API call. This is a REST API call. We do have a well-documented web page, several web pages, that will allow you to kind of see all the REST APIs that are available. We also provide some examples as well. So some of the more common examples, and one of the common examples is to do a business data query. And so I followed this pattern here, and pull it up again here. So I'm able to, I want to do a query, and I'm doing a query on the hotel request, and there's a query called find. I just want to bring back all of the ones that are available. And these are the limits that you can provide, the optional limits as well. So once you make that query, it gets brought back as a JSON object, and you have to go through that JSON object and format another JSON object that you can feed into the chart widget itself. So I've got another JSON object here that I'm creating of labels and data, and which gets then fed into this widget, right? So make the REST API call. I then format the data into labels and data, and then I feed that into this particular widget. So that's how that works. Now, I also mentioned that you can also create customized widgets. All right, so let me see if I can pull one up here. Here we go. Right, so I created a Gantt chart widget. As you can see here, I can pull in various JavaScript libraries. I can also do it via HTTP URL. You can pull in the various libraries. You can put in your template, your HTML. Then you can put in your controller code, your primarily Angular, but it can also be straight JavaScript. And you can also put in your property. So you can extend the UI framework and create new components as needed. All right. So for each one of these tasks, we also have we'll also have a form associated with each of these tasks. You can go ahead and have a look at it. All right. As you saw the data. It was in read-only mode, so I can view it, but I can't make any changes to it. I can also preview it. And you can also change the form factor, right? As I mentioned before, since it's Angular and Bootstrap based, you can build out one UI, and then you can configure it to render differently in different formats. So obviously, when you're on a smartphone or a tablet, you may not necessarily want to see it like this. So it automatically will. And you can also configure it to say, to see how many columns or to define how many columns it takes up. Right? So it's a very flexible framework. All right. So we've talked about the process. We talked about the forms. Down here, we have, over here, with the notify requester, we are utilizing an email connector to send that email, right? So if you recall, we have this email here. How do we get to this email? Well, we utilized an email connector, and you can create connectors inbound or connectors outbound. I decided to create a connector inbound, and I utilized an email connector. Right? So you add an email connector, you give it a name, you provide the SMTP host and the port. You also provide the authentication credentials to log into the SMTP server. For the demo, I just hard-coded the from and the to, but these can easily be variables. For the subject and the message, I created scripts. Right. So in this case, depending on whether or not the request has been approved or not approved, you'll get that, right, has been approved for the subject, and as well as for the message template. Give that a moment. Once it comes up, you'll see that it's the HTML-based message, which will include the call out to the REST API extension, which I'll show you in just a bit. I'm not sure why this is a little slow. All right, well, we'll cancel it for the time being. Nope. All right, so let's see if we can do it again real quick here before we move on. There we go. All right, so here's the scripting for the message template, right? Your request for the destination, lasting has been or not approved, and then down here is that link, right? And this link happens to be a REST API extension that I wrote, sending a message back to the process instance saying, this person acknowledges that he or she received this message. All right, so let's go back to the email itself. Here's the link, right? So where did that REST API extension come from? Well, I already have it up and running here, over here. Let's go to full screen mode. And so I wrote this REST API extension. As I mentioned before, what the studio will do is it'll generate all of the skeleton code for you. You simply have to put in the kind of the glue code to make it work. So I'm expecting all these parameters from the REST API extension, for the REST API extension, and I'm just sending back error messages in case the parameter isn't being sent. And down here is I actually send the message itself. Right. So you do have to be somewhat familiar with Bonita API, or the engine APIs, but as I mentioned, if you're comfortable coding in Java, it's pretty straightforward and pretty easy to create extensions as needed. Okay. Right. Oh, and the connectors themselves. Right. Test connector. Right, so all of these connectors are available, right? You've got your content management system, CRM, connectors into Salesforce, connectors into databases, ERP, and so forth. So we do provide a number of connectors out of the box. This one here, file transfer, is actually a custom connector that I wrote. I just needed a connector to connect into an FTP server, download a file, and attach that file to a process instance. So I'm going to show you that very quickly. Let's go to connectors, edit implementation. Right, so with this implementation, you can also include jar files, dependencies as you need. And once the code comes up, I can define input parameters, right? In this case, I define FTP server, username, and password, and so forth. And most of this code is just straight up FTP. I'm a sales engineer. I've been one now for 12 years. I have not been a hardcore developer in that amount of time. So I'm no Java expert by any means, so I go out to the internet, I Google FTP Java code, and I quite literally copy and paste that code into here. The only things that I really had to add was this document value. So I read in the bytes, and then I attach that to a process instance. Right? So out of all this code, all of this is just straight up FTP code, and these 2 lines here are just Bonita specific, creating a document, a Bonita document, and then attaching it to the process instance. All right. All right. Collaboration, right? So we talked about, let's just get back here to the demo very quickly. Right, so we talked about living applications, building the process applications, and then next up we'll talk about collaboration and monitoring and reporting. All right, so collaboration. So we do currently offer ways to work on a centralized repository. We currently support Subversion. Now, when I say that, a lot of our customers will say, well, that's nice, but we use Git. We want to use Git. And in our next release of Bonita, we are happy to announce that we will have Git support as well. So when you come here in the next version of Bonita, which we hope to announce soon, you'll see you want to choose SVN, Subversion, or Git. And so you can connect into your repository, pull in artifacts from the repository. You'll get a local copy here on your machine. And then what will happen is you'll make updates, and you'll have the ability to commit those artifacts. It works a little differently with Git. You have to kind of a couple more steps within Git. They're very strict on how things are done, and then you commit it to the repository. All right, pretty cool stuff. Beyond collaboration, I mentioned, let me just pull up my Jenkins here. Right now we do, let me just log in here very quickly. So we do offer integration with Jenkins currently. So if you wanted to automate your kind of deployment of applications, like in this case, I've got a test loan origination, right? Build out an application and deploy it out to a remote server, you can certainly do that. But with the Bonita continuous delivery, this takes it a step farther. And so it allows you to more easily build out these DevOps applications and further automate your testing, right? That was the other aspect to deployment. Deployment is one thing, but a lot of our customers are asking for not only automation of deployment of applications, but automation of testing of those applications. And with the latest release of the Bonita continuous delivery, so if you recall, that is this add-on here, right? So we're automating the deployment and testing of those applications, and the BCD module also utilizes Jenkins as well. All right. All right, and then lastly, monitoring and reporting, right? You already saw an example of that here, right? So you were able to incorporate some level of reporting by incorporating chart widgets into your page. So you can get quite sophisticated in terms of your dashboards. What you're seeing here, let me log back in. Right, so what you're seeing here is all out of the box. There's nothing custom that needed to be done here. You simply utilize the underlying chart widgets, and we simply logged into did some queries onto the business data model database and pulled up some information, and we're able to graphically show that information. So you can build out these very complex, and you can also incorporate that with other things, right? I showed you how I was able to start new processes, but you've got some data here, you've got some data here graphically. You can also show data via a table just like this. So the the information you're seeing here doesn't actually correspond in this case to the data you're seeing here, but you can certainly do that, right? So you can create very complex and data-rich dashboards. Right. We also provide kind of the more generic reporting, right? So what you're seeing here is the out-of-the-box portal, and I just logged in as a user, and you can give users different profiles by default. Users are also administrators, but obviously in an actual implementation, you'll have many users but very few administrators. So I'm going to switch over to the administrator view, and within that view, I can pull up the analytics. Now, given that we're a fairly, I won't say generic product, but a fairly generic process product, we can't really build out very specific reporting because we don't know your business process, we don't know your business data. So what we provide, at least out of the box, is very generic. As you can see here, case or process instance average time, process instance history, process instance list, or task list. Again, very generic, very process, just really generic process data. But you can pull that information up. So let's pull up some information here. Right. So, and you can pull up that information. I went out to our showroom because when you're generating reports, you want to actually see some data rather than a whole lot of white space. Right. So these are all the process instances that have been run. And you can also export it out as a PDF file. All right. So I went very fast. I threw a lot of information at you, but just to review very quickly, right? I built out that living application. You can think of that living application as a standalone application. I was able to start processes from that application, and I was able to complete tasks within that application itself. The living application, as the name implies, allows you to kind of build these applications, well, in this case, from design time. But once these applications are deployed, you can actually update these at runtime. Right, to show you a quick example of that. Let's go to my local. So this is my local box. Go to applications. And here's the application that I deployed out from my design time. And I can add additional pages and change look and feel and whatnot. Right, so if I come here, right, we see that the living application that I just built. If I make a change to it, I want to change the theme. This is the Bootstrap theme. As you can see, I changed the look and feel of that. Right. So that's how quickly you can make changes. Now, I made a change to a theme, which is a relatively simple change, but you can also add pages. So as you build out these applications, you want to add more pages to that application. You create that page with the design time, you export it out, import it into your runtime, and you can simply add it on to this page. Let's see if I can do that very quickly. So let me add a page here. Test. Let's see. Oh, this is an HR manager page. All right, let me add that. Okay. HR, click on add. Now, if I come back here, what should happen is, right, we got the page that I started off with, the task list that we have, and then we have this HR page that I just added. Right. I don't have a whole lot of information in this one just yet because I haven't run a number of processes, but this is another page that I created previously. I simply added it to this application. So you can see kind of the ease once you have these pages built, how you can then build and adapt your applications as needed. And this is all at runtime. You don't have to go back to your design time and then redeploy the application. You can simply update that at runtime. All right. Right. I talked very quickly about collaboration. We currently support Subversion, and we will soon also support Git. And then lastly, monitoring reporting. Even though you saw bits and pieces of monitoring, you can incorporate that as part of your pages. We do provide some rather generic reporting out of the box as well, but typically most of our customers utilize kind of the customized reporting aspects of it because it really shows the power of the business intelligence information they receive from Bonita Soft. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. All right, Nicola, how do I do this? Let's see. All right, Nicola, where can I open it up for folks on the call here? Okay. All right, while we're waiting for that we have some questions on. Okay, so let me see if I can open this up. All right. All right, so I'm trying to open this was opening up before. Okay, so does your product support multi-tenancy? All right, so how would you compare using Bonita for simply creating processes? Right, so question here is about using something like Visio or drawing tool. When you draw out a process, say in Visio or any drawing, you're simply kind of representing that process rather than in Bonita, you're going to actually run that process for real, right? So when you build out a process application or process drawing here, in this case, right, you're running this for real. You've got an actual form, starts up a process. It then goes to a manager. It then goes to a VP. In this case, I send out an email at the very end. So you're integrating with actual systems and applications rather than just a drawing. So when you're drawing out a process flow, it's just a drawing. It's a representation. And in many cases, that might be enough. But in this case, when you're utilizing something like Bonita, you're going to actually use it for real. All right, so how comfortable, successful would a business analyst who doesn't have programming experience be trying to use this tool? Good question. So a business analyst would be able to view this, participate in the development of the application itself, kind of looking at this diagram can certainly follow it. But the actual development, right, the kind of the forms themselves, the integrations, whatnot, would be handled by a developer. Right. Our tooling is really geared towards developers, making them more productive. So depending on the technical savvy of your business analyst, most business analysts wouldn't be doing the hands-on. They would view these diagrams and provide feedback on, yes, this is the process flow, or no, this should occur here, and so forth. Okay, so why would you create a living application versus simply making process diagrams, right? So you could think of living applications really as almost like a dashboard that sits on top of a process application. If we go back to let's go back. let's go HR management. Let's go to invoice management. Right, so something like this could not be captured necessarily in a process flow, right? This is just a diagram. This is just you're gathering information. It's not really a process flow. What this page is doing is reaching back into the Bonita database and pulling up information and showing some data, right? So it's not really a process. When you think of a process, well, at least when I think of a process, right, you start a process that goes to somebody, then it goes to somebody else, and then it might interact with a system. So a living application, you can think of it as a supervisor to a process. You can utilize a process within a living application, but you can use a living application independently of a process. Think a dashboard. Dashboard is probably the easiest thing to kind of understand what a living application would be. Why would you create a living application versus simply making process diagrams for applications built in other systems or technologies? Right. So right. So there's a couple of things. So the process diagrams themselves, the BPM in general, you could think of BPM as a choreographer, right? So you've got these different systems. You don't necessarily want to remove them, right? You don't want to you want to reuse them. You don't want to simply rip them out and replace them with something else. So BPM generally acts as a choreographer between systems. And so that's why you would have a diagram like this to show that choreography. Okay, I do step A, and then I go to Salesforce, get some more information, then I go to step B, and then I get an approval, and then I, depending on if it's approved or not, and then I go to step C or D. So you're documenting the choreography. The advantage of the living application, it allows you to integrate several applications into a cohesive UI, right? So we're trying to get our end users away from swivel chairing between different applications, opening up, say, 2, 3, 4 different windows to access different systems. You simply have this living application that can access all of those at once, and you present a cohesive screen to the end user, right? Because in the end, the end user doesn't really care, well, I have to log into SAP, I have to log into Salesforce. They don't care. They just want to have a single screen and work together, or work in a single screen to get their work done. So if you can make that easier for your end user, you'll make them more productive. And that's the reason why we use something like the living application. Multi-tenancy, yes, absolutely. So we do support multi-tenancy. Right, so we do support multi-tenancy. You can have multiple tenants in a single database. There is a tenant ID associated with all the data in that database. So it certainly is possible. Send me your email. I will send you a link. In fact, actually, I'll just show it here. If you go to bonitasoft.com. So if you go out to bonitasoft.com, go out to documentation. Right, so you can do tenancy. There you go. So multi-tenancy. So yes, we do. Just go out to bonitasoft.com, documentation, do search, and hopefully it'll present you the information that you're looking for. Is it possible to create an application that is not tied to Bonita by just using the Bonita REST services? Oh, I see what you're talking, like a front end. Absolutely. So we go back here. Let's come here. Yeah, here we go. So as you saw in this slide here, you've got your customized application, your custom app. It could be written anywhere, anything, and it could be anywhere. You connect into the Bonita server via REST API, right? The main thing when you utilize the Bonita REST APIs is that you authenticate. So you have to be authenticated. You have to be a user within Bonita, right? And if you recall, you would utilize our LDAP synchronizer to bring in actual users from your user registry, be it LDAP or Active Directory, into Bonita. So once you're an authenticated user, you can utilize the REST APIs at will. So you could log in, you can utilize single sign-on. So if you go to the documentation and put in SSO, you'll see the documentation regarding SSO. Once you've been authenticated, you can start new process instances, you can get tasks for a particular user, you can claim tasks, work on tasks, complete tasks on behalf of that user, all through the REST API. So absolutely, you can create your own customized front end. The Bonita platform and engine can be hosted in different servers. Well, the design time, right, this design time will actually be local to your developer's laptop / desktop. So they'll have a complete kind of environment. So they'll have the studios, and they'll have a server where they'll be running their application. This server, you could have a dev or a test, QA, and production server remotely. So yes, you can have them on different servers. The databases themselves can be on different boxes as well. Is it possible to generate live dashboard through Bonita? We'll have to clarify that one, because you can certainly create a dashboard and it can be live, so it's getting information. As you refresh the dashboard, you can also set up auto refresh. You can get information from whatever data source you're getting it from, whether it's Bonita or some sort of data warehouse. All processes share the same BDM, or each process have their own BDM? Good question. So let's go back to the business data model, manage. Right. So each of these is a separate table in a database, but yes, multiple processes can share the same template. They'll be sharing the same sharing the same database, the same table. You can segregate that information into different processes. You'd probably have to have an additional flag to kind of denote which row goes to which process if you want to go that route. We will be introducing what we call a granular filtration, or a granular filter for data. So if you want to have data that can be seen by one set of people versus another set of people, you can set that up. Right now, if you're sharing a business data object here, everyone has access to the same data. But soon we will have this granular filter of data, this BDM data, which will allow you to really say, well, this group of people gets to see this data, and this group of people gets to see that data. All right, how does Bonita interact with electronic document management systems? Well, we do provide a number of connectors out of the box. Oops. Let me pull that up here. There we go. Right, so we do provide an alfresco connector. We do provide a kind of more generic content management interoperability systems connector. And if either of those don't meet your needs, as I mentioned before, you can create your own. So the primary skill being Java. Can you take the entry of a new record in a database like a signal to start a process? Absolutely. So you could also do via document as well. You just have to utilize something to send an API, a REST API call into Bonita, and it doesn't have to be a database. It can be virtually anything. So utilize the REST API to start up a new process. Absolutely. Is it possible to embed forms and dashboards created in Bonita in our custom application? Yes. So primarily it's through iframes. So I've done it through iframes. Let's see if I can pull it up here. We do have a custom widget that I well, I didn't build, but I actually use, here it is, iframe. So if you wanted to incorporate your own fragment within Bonita form, you would simply use something like this in iframe. A lot of extensions are available on our community, right? If you're not familiar with our community, if you go out to bonitasoft.com and go to community, we do provide a number of extensions out of the box. Some are supported, quote unquote supported, and others are as is. We put them out there and you get to use them, and if you have questions, you can put them out on the form, and we do our best to answer them. So yes, so you can incorporate your own content into Bonita. The other option is to create a custom widget, right? So as I mentioned before, you can bring in all the libraries you want and create custom widgets that way as well. All right, so we got a couple more minutes here. Yes, contact. So Nicola reminded me to, we'll be sending out an email with all the folks who had registered. If you have additional questions, if you're like me, I tend to not think of questions during the meeting, and it's usually about 10, 15 minutes or even a half an hour or even a day afterwards. Oh yeah, what about this and what about that? Feel free to reach out to us. I'm on the forums. If people ask questions on the forum, and in fact, I recognize a few names on the attendee list. So I try to answer them as quickly as possible and to the best of my knowledge. But feel free. Here we go. If you have more questions, go to bonitasoft.com, contact us. There we go, contact us, bonitasoft.com, contact us. And as I said, I'm on the forums. I check out questions, and as I said, I try to answer them as quickly and as best I can. All right. If there are no other questions, I thank you for attending the webinar today. And I wish I was able to figure out putting the audio back on, but I'll work on that with Nicola. Thank you, everybody.